Hello, everybody. This is the Earful Tower podcast. My name is Oliver G, and today we're going to be talking about the museums of Paris, which is a topic I've covered a little bit in the past, but today we're going to do a deep dive. Thank you to two authors who are sitting in front of me. I'm going to introduce them right now. I'm even going to try and pronounce both your surnames, although I don't know what I've got myself into. I'm sitting with Anne Carminati.
Yes.
It sounds Italian.
Si, yeah.
It is?
It is.
Aha, so you've got a bit of Italian as well going on.
Right, 50%.
50%? Right, okay. Anne Carminati and James Wesolowski.
Perfect.
Is that Polish?
Yes.
There you go. How do you say it?
Wesolowski.
Wesolowski. What do they say in Poland?
Wesolowski.
Wesolowski. Okay, well, this is like the Olympic Games here right now with these different nationalities going. I want to talk about museums with you guys, and straight away off the bat, 111 museums in Paris that you shouldn't miss. You've written the book. I'm holding it in my hand. It seems like a lot of museums to not miss. Where did we get 111 from? Where did that come from?
Actually, there are more than that.
How many are there?
I think over 130, right?
147 at my last count.
So what happened to those other 30 that didn't make the cut? What were they no good, or did you just want to have 111 as the number?
Oh, well, 111 is the point of the series that this book is a part of.
Right.
The editor is from Cologne, and Cologne, the lucky number of Cologne is 11.
Right.
They have their annual Mardi Gras festival on November 11th at 11/11.
Okay.
So when the editor decided that they would do a book series for local travel, they wanted to do a number, and 11 was the number that came to mind, but that's too few, so they added 1 and went with it.
So then my question reverses a little bit now. Instead of the 30 that didn't make the cut, are there really 111 great museums in Paris, or were there some that snuck in that did not deserve to? So you guys really like museums, huh? I'm talking to yeah? Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's get started on how we're going to tackle this topic, because I would assume that a lot of people come to Paris and they're like, well, I got to see the Louvre. I've got to maybe try and see the Musée d'Orsay, and then maybe that's the limit of it.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, when we put the list of museums together, and then we had to make phone calls and send emails to all the museums, I thought to myself, well, I really have to get the big ones out, because they're probably going to take forever to reply.
Yeah.
They don't know who we are.
Right.
So I decided to reach out to le Musée du Louvre, of course, and then le Musée d'Orsay et Centre Pompidou.
Right.
And to my surprise, within a few hours, the
Really?
Musée du Louvre replied to me. And I thought, why?
Right.
I mean, everyone knows about the Louvre. They
Yeah.
don't need any publicity and any guidebook. Why do they want to talk to me? So I had literally a meeting 2 days later, and I met this woman who's head of communication at the Louvre, and we started to chat. And to me, I mean, the Louvre is the biggest museum in the world.
Yeah.
And she explained to me that basically they have the 3 big stars of the Louvre: the Mona Lisa, La Victoire de Samothrace, and
Venus de Milo?
Huh?
Venus de Milo?
Yeah, La Venus de Milo.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. You got 111 to remember.
And then they steal the show.
Right.
So basically, everyone goes and see these 3 stars, and then they say, okay, well, this is on my bucket list of things to see at the Louvre, and then off they go, and they just do not go anywhere else. And she said it's a blessing and a curse altogether, because no one knows about the galleries. So when you think of the Louvre, you think that it's going to be crowded, you don't want to go, you just get, you see the stars, and then off you go. But if you wander through the Aile Richelieu, for example, it's quiet. You have the Louvre for yourself, and you discover absolutely astonishing works. So that was the big surprise.
That's interesting, because it's kind of the same as people that just go to the Louvre and the Musée d'Orsay. It's the same as going to that Holy Trinity in the Louvre. It's like I think it's maybe also related to people. The most valuable thing in Paris is your time. People who come here for 5-6 days, they're like, if I'm going to go to the Louvre, I've just got to tick things off. What's your advice to these people?
Well, I think that you can take a few extra...
A couple of extra loops.
Exactly. and walk through these galleries because you'll be absolutely amazed.
So specifically,
by what you see.
what's a good gallery to seek out?
I think Galerie Richelieu is the most fascinating gallery, and La Cour Marly is absolutely stunning. You know, that was the La Cour Marly was the summer residence of Louis XIV. That was outside of Paris and that got destroyed during the Revolution. So nothing is left except a few statues. And the horses are very famous. So they recreated, if you will, the gardens of La Cour Marly, which is under a glass roof, and it's absolutely stunning. So go there, then you can discover the salons of Napoleon III. You can discover, antiquities and the oldest constitution in the world that dates back from, before Christ. There was written, rules. It's really worth a visit.
It feels to me that maybe it's worth 2 visits. You do the first one to just get it out of your system and go and see the main things. I feel like that about Paris too. I feel like people should come to Paris the first time to just tick off things, wait in lines, climb the Eiffel Tower. Right. And then for me, I think the trip really begins on your second visit to Paris.
Well, doesn't it also, with any place, if you go to a place the first time, you don't know whether you're going to love it, fall in love with it immediately or not, or whether you're just going to want to tick the boxes off and say, I went there. So the idea that you have to come here and try to accomplish everything, see every museum that's important, see all the little individual artworks, maybe, and go to all the different monuments, maybe that's asking too much of yourself. Maybe find out just whether the vibe really hits you, and then make the plan to come back.
What do you think about this, James? I've got a theory that there's some 10-minute museums in Paris where you can go in, get a vibe in 10 minutes, and then decide if you want to go back or hang around later, but 10 minutes could suffice. For example, Victor Hugo Museum. What's your take on
10 minutes?
Yeah, but I mean, hear me out. Like the Louvre, you could never do a 10-minute visit. Just forget it. It's never going to happen. But Musée Victor Hugo, you could walk in the front door, walk every room physically in 10 minutes and get out of there. It's physically possible. You don't think it's physically possible? Of course it's physically possible.
Well, it's physically possible, but you won't get through the essence of who he was.
No, but it's like you get a taste for it by seeing, literally, you can be surrounded by everything in 10 minutes and get the sense of it.
Okay, let me ask you this question. Yeah. What did you see after? What do you remember after 10 minutes? What did you understand of Victor Hugo's personality?
Nothing at all. No, I'm kidding. But no. But I think the idea is that it's to get a sense. It's like watching a trailer for a movie, right? You can watch a trailer. You don't know really even what the movie's about, but you go, yeah, I want to watch that. And I think, especially because it's free, Victor Hugo's museum, is you can just get that sense and go, yeah, this is for me. I want to come back for 2 hours, or that'll do.
Okay, so did you want to come back?
I'm different though. I'm talking about people in general. I've been 5 times. I like it. I like Victor Hugo and that museum, but I feel like you can get a sense of it really quickly. I feel like I've hit a sore point with you.
I tell people all the time, there are the half-hour to 45-minute museums.
Yeah.
The very, very small ones.
That's the same concept as mine, except you just tripled it.
But 10 minutes is kind of short.
Yeah.
But there's a half-hour to 45-minute museums where you can do it and you can get something out of it. And if that's all you have, I would rather that you go to a small museum that's very focused and get something out of your 45 minutes than try to go to the Louvre or the d'Orsay and see anything in 45 minutes, because you're going to spend most of your time waiting to get in and go and getting to where you want to see.
True.
And then you're in a rush to try to experience something with a million other people.
Yeah.
But by and large, the museums, they come in and you know nothing about them maybe at the time, and then something draws you in.
Yeah.
And then you can't walk. I mean, if you allow yourself to really take a deep dive into one little thing maybe, then suddenly you're sucked in, and now I have to know more. Now I have to see more. And I can't tell you how many museums that I went to in the last 7-8 years where I had very low expectations. Maybe I didn't know anything about it. Maybe it didn't sound interesting off at the beginning. But the moment I spend 10, 15 minutes looking at that first thing and say, oh my God, what else is here?
Yeah.
I have to see the rest of it.
And you sort of specialize, or at least for the book, you focus more on the smaller museums, James.
I wanted to discover the things that I hadn't myself seen.
Right.
Because having come here for 20 years and having lived here for a long time, I had seen all the big institutions, and I'd seen them in the way that I know how to see them. So I was interested in seeing these other museums. And since the brief is to do 111 museums,
Right.
I wanted to go see all the small ones. Plus, I like the quirky, I like the science, I like the history. I love history.
Right.
So those are the ones that I wanted to see. And those are the ones that I knew personally I would find something that I'd be surprised about, really pleasantly surprised about.
Right. Can you give me some examples? What are some quirky ones? Remember, a lot of people listening maybe have only heard of 3 or 4 museums in Paris.
Well, luckily, we've had this conversation before amongst ourselves here. And for me, the one I always bring up right away is the Cité de l'Économie, the city of economics.
Is that the one that's like in the 17th?
It's in the 8th. It's in the 8th. It's near Parc Monceau.
Yeah, okay. The one that's got like there's a tower in there that's just turned into a...
It's kind of a Gothic.
It's kind of a Gothic. It's a recreation of the Château de Blois.
Right.
It's spectacular. And we had no expectations of it because we were like city of economics, yawn. It was hard to initially get excited about it.
Some of the names. I mean, in English, it doesn't work. It doesn't maybe in French it works really nicely, but in English it doesn't grasp you.
Oh, no. I'll tell you the story, though. Why James went is because I guess we were considering, other museums, and I went to see the Musée Jean-Jacques Henner, who was the most famous artist of his time, but is totally forgotten now. So that was a kind of a beautiful discovery. But moving on to the Museum of la Cité de l'Économie, I was walking back. It's not very far from le Musée Jean-Jacques Henner. I was walking in front of that Gothic castle, and I said, "What is that?" So I came in and I saw that it was a museum, the Museum of Economy. And I said to James, okay, well, there's this museum, but I really don't want to go.
Yeah.
And I said to him, do you want to go? And he said, yeah. And it turned out to be an amazing surprise.
Have you been back?
No, but I'm eager to discover it.
Yeah. I've seen like on social media that there's been a lot of talk lately. There's a new brunch spot that's opened up under that glass ceiling. I don't know if it had opened when you visited.
No.
Yeah, so I think it might be starting to get popular.
It should be popular.
It should be. Why do you like it? What's so...
The Cité de l'Économie is about economics, but it's also about a great historical figure's incredible mansion. It's about a collector of Flemish and Italian art. It's about the history of relationships with famous people in that era, in that location. It has kind of interactive activities for people who are young and old, who like museums, who don't like museums. I mean, you can do something. There's something, kind of the something for everyone aspect of it, which when you look at the name of the museum, you have no reason to believe that would be the case. But there's a virtual reality tour, virtual reality experience that you can do with the cask, and it has the ability. At the time, I'm sure they still have it. They had the ability to play games where you're mapping out strategy for economic negotiations, and you're in a room with other people across a conference table, and you're negotiating something to do with world economics. You can go down in the bank vaults. You can go down in the bank vaults, which are separated from the rest of the place by a moat with a retractable drawbridge.
What, downstairs there? Or?
Yeah, it had a retractable drawbridge. Really? It was a moat, and it is the old Banque de France safety deposit room.
Wow!
And you can have your face put on a euro note.
Yeah, I remember.
I mean, there's things like that, and then it has more traditional pedagogical stuff to learn about how economics works, and it's also. As an American, it's from a very French perspective. So the things that they focus on in terms of economics are maybe a little bit different than you would if you're an American, for instance. So that was interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
But you wrap all of this stuff together, and it was just this completely unforgettable and completely surprising experience.
I think that kind of ties into. There's a lot of the museums. I'm interested if it's a trend with these 111 that you've chosen. of the museum buildings themselves can be quite fascinating, even if you forget about everything that's inside. Like these
I
museums,
have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, the buildings are as important as the collections.
Sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Does any spring to mind when I say that?
Oh, if you visit Musée des Archives, Musée Carnavalet.
Des Archives is probably my favorite.
Yeah,
Giacometti.
Musée la Nature et de la Chasse et de la Nature.
Right. So these are like big old aristocratic mansions that are.
Yeah, that's in
the Picasso
Marais.
Museum, even.
The Giacometti.
The Giacometti, spectacular. I think that's one of my favorite museums.
What does it for you about the Giacometti?
Well, it's two things. The building itself is a transition between Art Nouveau and Art Deco. And an architect was living in there, and he was the architect who built the Bon Marché, favorite department store in Paris.
Yeah.
And that transition period between the Art Nouveau and Art Deco is just spectacular. There's like this huge, bright white studio where he was working, and then details of Art Nouveau flowery designs in the living room.
Right.
And then past this building, you discover Jati Studio that has been reconstituted with he's been living in 20 square meter studio all of his life, just a few meters away from that townhouse, and he was renting the place. And his wife, when he passed, negotiated with the owner of his studio to take the walls and transfer it to the Fondation Giacometti.
Oh, wow.
And what is spectacular is that there's a big glass where you can see through his studio, and then you realize that all of his sketches were done on his walls. I mean, can you imagine 20 square meter where he lived 40 years of his life? It's amazing, and his most famous sculptures, paintings were done there, and he was sketching everything on the walls.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you think about these kind of museums, I think they'd be quite, I don't want to say criminally overlooked by visitors to Paris, but I mean, if you asked 1,000 tourists coming to Paris, not many will have heard of that museum in particular.
No, I've never heard anyone knowing of Musée Giacometti.
Right,
That's for sure.
Right.
But having said that, the few times that I've gone, there has been a fair number of people inside.
Yeah.
And maybe it's Parisians who know about it and are interested to see the latest temporary collection, temporary exhibition. But there are people there who appreciate it and who know it and who see it.
Because it's a little bit out of the way as well.
It's
not that far.
It's not too far away, but the thing is, it's small, so it's not going to be a major institution's. It's not going to be able to accommodate that kind of traffic, anyways, and that's fine.
Yeah, it's right next to La Fondation Cartier, so it's 5 minutes away from there.
But what about do you guys? Before we press record, you said that you kind of wrote this book for people. Did you say even for Parisians, people who live here who want to see the city's museums in a different light? Was that kind of the vibe? Is that what you said?
Well, in the foreword, we proposed two ideas for the book. Why did we do this? We did it because Parisians, you come to the museums when you're a kid with your school group,
right?
And then you see the permanent exhibition in a museum, and you declare yourself having visited the museum. And then 40 years later, that was still your experience, and that's still your memory of that museum. The museum's moved on; it's changed, it's added things, it's redone its whole route, it's re-envisioned itself, and so part of the effort was to encourage Parisians to go back and look at the permanent exhibits in some of these museums that maybe they haven't seen in 30, 40 years. The second thing is to encourage tourists to maybe even if take a little bit of time off of their schedule, and instead of going to the big institutions, maybe pick one of these smaller museums or something that they find interesting, but they didn't even realize was in Paris, and go see that as well. And experience some of that.
I have to say that all my French friends, when they purchased the book and they were looking at the list of museums, they were really, truly excited because they had no idea about, I would say, a good 50% they had.
Really?
Of the list, they had no idea that existed. So then now they're all excited. They are on a hunt, to visit the next unknown museum.
Do you feel that as a French woman, do you feel like, and especially as a French woman who's had one foot in New York for so long as well, do you feel like French people visit museums differently, especially Parisian museums, compared to other people from around the world? Is there a different
I think
approach?
it's part of our cultural heritage. That's something that you talk about when you go out to dinner with friends, something you share, whether it's the exhibit itself, whether it's the intellectual discussion about a certain movement or a discovery, whether it's the arts or another topic. It's really a topic of a conversation that you have with your friends. You always say, "Oh, what have you seen lately?
Yeah.
Where did you go?"
Yeah.
It's like, it's like the same as what was the last movie you saw? Did you like anything?
It's interesting
part of a
because,
conversation.
I'm from Australia, and the city I grew up in, or towns I grew up in, we didn't have many museums, if any, and it certainly wasn't a conversation point at any dinner parties that I went to if you'd gone to see the latest museum. So coming to a city like Paris, and now I live here and being so spoiled for choice for so many different kinds of museums, and just being able to, a lot of them are free. I don't know what percentage of them are free. Do you know?
30%.
30%. So you can just walk into a museum that you happen to be passing. It's like a cultural explosion. It's almost dangerous.
Yeah.
Is that something that you noticed is different around the world, or is that? I mean, you've also got the American perspective, James.
Well, I mean, there's 111 museums in New York as well.
Sure.
And same thing when Anne says about her French friends not knowing that half of the museums existed. Half the places that I've seen in the same guide for New York, I didn't know half the places there either.
Right.
So in New York, I like to look at New York and Paris as kind of twins in a way. And in New York, everyone goes to the big museums and everyone knows the big museums and everyone loves the big museums. But there's a whole hell of a lot to see that's not very well known.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing here. I just think my experience with museums here is that the French are so heavily invested in their history, their patrimony, their culture, and it's reflected in large part through the care that they put into their museums.
Yeah.
You don't have to be particularly interested in the topic of the museum, but you know that chances are it's going to be extraordinarily well presented.
Yeah.
And in a way that is engaging, and you'll learn something and you'll see something beautiful or interesting or thought-provoking. And that in and of itself is part of what makes Paris so vibrant and wonderful.
I have to add something. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
I think that what I found absolutely amazing in Paris is all these artist ateliers.
Right.
Or collector's house,
right,
where you dive into history, you dive into a different time
Give me
period.
some examples. Which ones are you talking
Musée Jacques Marandré, Musée Bourdelle, Zadkine, Giacometti,
right.
Musée Nissim de Camondo,
Right.
To name a few, where you travel, Musée de la Vie Romantique, which I adore. You dive into Paris lifestyle, culture, time period, and you feel like you're reliving this time. So you know about the artists, or you discover about the artists, you discover about their social, interactions with other artists, where they were hanging, at which cafe they were going. You discover a life altogether, more than the artist and its artwork. You discover history, culture, politics, what was happening at that time. Same as the Musée Montmartre. You go beyond. And all of a sudden, you look at Paris as a map where you saw, you went from La Nouvelle Athènes, where all the artists were hanging out, to La Plaine Monceau, Montmartre, where Picasso started, Montparnasse, and you see where the different hubs of artists at different time periods and where they were hanging out. And I think that's all of a sudden you have a more concrete view of what was arts life in Paris, or intellectual life with, authors, collectors along.
That's an interesting thought. You could almost have a walking tour based
exactly.
on...
Yeah.
I wonder, are there many museums for the writers, like of the left bank? Because as you were saying some of the names and the famous Paris names from the past, it struck me that there's not an Ernest Hemingway museum or,
No, I mean, I guess you would go to Le Café de Flore or Le de Magot to see where they were hanging out and having their conversations. There's
but maybe
no
it's harder for an author. You can't put pages of his work on the wall, whereas for Picasso,
the one author is Victor Hugo and Balzac. They're two museums,
Right.
Balzac is an experience in itself too.
Nice views.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the cafe, the garden.
It's another museum that is excellent for just the building, if you forget what's inside.
Yeah, actually, I have a friend of mine who's a playwright. And I said to him, he loves, reading books, of course. And I said, do you know about Musée Balzac? And he said, oh, no. I said, you should go there.
Yeah.
And now he goes there once a week religiously because it's inspirational. Yeah. The view is stunning. The cafe is great. Nice, and just to discover about Balzac
his cane.
is
big fan of his cane.
His cane.
Yeah.
But do you know that he had no talent for writing? Zero.
What do you mean?
His parents, he came from a well-off family, a bourgeois family. And his parents told him to become a lawyer. He studied law and then decided that it was not for him.
Yeah.
So he started writing on the side, some poems and novels and play as well. And so he showed it to his parents, and his parents were friends with an academician. And they showed the work to the academician, and he said to Balzac, my dear, I think you should give up.
Really?
Yeah. And Balzac thought, okay, well, I'm still going to write, but about something else.
Wow.
So his parents funded a 1-year sabbatical, and he locked himself in a bedroom and wrote for endless hours.
But he forced himself to learn how to write.
He forced himself to write on his own.
That gives us all hope.
Exactly.
Right?
It took him over 10 years to become who he became.
You know what? I think when I went to that Balzac museum, there was a lot of Picasso stuff on the walls. I don't know if that was a temporary thing or if that's... if that rings a bell, it's probably
must have been temporary.
Yeah,
because they do exhibits there. They do temporary exhibits, which are not always about him.
So it must have been 5 years ago or something that I went. I don't know, but I was just going to say that what I learned with visiting museums, because I visited an awful lot in the city, is that as you learn about someone, for example, you go to the Picasso Museum and then you see Picasso elsewhere, and you go, "Oh, that's connected to this,"
right? Exactly.
And it's kind of like. You mentioned before people revisiting museums that they'd visited as children. Even just revisiting museums after you've seen other museums can be a kind of an unlocking thing that I really appreciated as I went around town.
Or you visit something and you learn something new. This is a great example is the Dreyfus Affair. Mm-hmm. And if you'll see it at several different museums. You might go out to the Maison Zola outside of town, and you might see the big exhibit about J'accuse and the whole Dreyfus Affair, and then you start seeing it in other museums. You see it in the Clemenceau Museum. Sure. You see it in the Jewish History Museum. You see it in the Carnavalet because of the history of Paris. You see it over and over and over again from different angles, and suddenly you know so much more about the topic, and it just appears everywhere like that.
It's a bit like that with Paris, I find. Outside of museums, like me, I tend to focus in on something. I might become obsessed with the Bièvre River that ran under the city somewhere, or the Philippe Auguste Wall that ran elsewhere, and then finding, for example, that they connected here, or you go down another street and see a medallion for something else, and then find yourself going on another mystical journey somewhere. It's kind of the same thing with museums, except in the museums you've got a lovely plaque there explaining it, which brings me to a point that I want to address before. See, 30 minutes has already passed. It goes quick. In terms of people, there'll be people listening to this show right now thinking, oh, small museums, I'm scared. They might not be in English. Did you find that they're accommodating to the non-French speakers in general, or that they have some work to do?
I think Parisian museums are pretty bilingual.
At this point,
Yeah.
20 years ago, I would have said something different.
Really? So it's changed.
And Parisian museums do a very good job of doing intermittent renovations of the tour and the way they present their information.
Right.
And most of the ones that you've seen in the last 10 years, English is a full partner with French in the descriptions and whatnot.
Wow. I mean, there you go. If you needed any more reason to go out and check the museums of Paris, then there you go. Also, the book, 111 Museums in Paris That You Shouldn't Miss. I'll put a link in the show notes below. How can people follow you guys if they want to see more? What's the best way? Where do you want to send them?
Well, I write a blog about behind-the-scenes stories of writing this book. So you'll find a whole set of other information.
What's the name of the blog?
Blog is about 111 museums.
That's what it's called, 111museums.com?
It's on maisonandcarminati.com, my company, and there's a blog associated with it.
We can link to that below. What about
then we also have 111 Museums Paris on Instagram.
111 Museums Paris on Instagram.
Where you'll get thousands of photos and stories about temporary exhibitions and things that we find interesting all over Paris.
Brilliant. Everybody go and check that out as we're speaking. I want to finish on a tough question. What was the 112th museum that didn't make the cut?
Come back in a year when we update the book, and you'll see it in the book.
Fair enough. Nothing that didn't make it?
Nah.
No, yeah. You guys have to be nice to the museums, I guess, as well, if you want them to let you back in.
We love them all.
No way. Okay, off the scenes. I'll get the answer, guys. Thank you so much for coming in the studio and talking to the Earful Tower for today. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Well, there you have it. That was Anne and James talking about museums. Check out their book, 111 Museums in Paris That You Shouldn't Miss. I'll link it all below. Happy museum hunting to everybody. And if you're enjoying the Earful Tower, if you want to see it thrive, consider becoming a Patreon member on patreon.com/the Earful Tower. Loads of bonuses to unlock, including museum stuff too. And join the members, join the club, help keep this thing spinning. I'll be back again on Monday with another episode. Merci beaucoup, and au revoir.